But then, okay, so we have a roundtable discussion, and normally if you do that live, you're sitting in a conference and you literally have a table and you're sitting a number of people. I think people are more encouraged to really start speaking. You look in the eye of someone and they really, answer more easily than sitting behind a computer.
Have we
offline,
all?
Right?
I've facilitated roundtables both online and physically. Have we all done it physically? I think. Yeah. And to me, when you're in a conference, you don't know anyone. Everybody knows the cultural code. If you're at the round table and you join and sat down at this particular table, you're sort of expected to say who you are, and you're expected to come with contribution. That it's a cultural code, right?
Yeah.
But it's also moderated. So if all of us are sitting on one table, there is as you said, like code of conduct. So of course you cannot be, because I can challenge you physically. So like, okay, so what is your name and what do you do? When you are online setting, you can actually hide. So there are two things that are it's puzzling me as an event organizer all these 15 years. I think that online events are so challenging and it's so exciting because the on-site events are usually very moderated. You know every single step, what the delegates is going to do from the moment that they go into the venue.
You can directed.
You can envision it. So okay, we're gonna put the registration here, then how the registration will look like, and then it's going to be elevator. On the elevator, we're gonna put music. We usually put the three kings, right? Because you want to have them excited all the time. So you are moderating. On online, you cannot moderate it because they're hiding behind the computers. So
and also, it's not a linear conference anymore. People go in and out and decide to...
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you think, Daniel? I mean, if you were to sit online, in a remote type of conference, and you're sitting in a discussion with 10-ish people, I mean, normally you would think that people are more, brave when sitting behind the computer than sitting, in real life speaking to someone. But it seems to be the reverse, right?
And I think it has to distinguish between writing, because I see that a lot of people are active if they can chat, but in terms of speaking, point. I think there's a difference. I find it hard to distinguish what's the hen and the egg, because you're almost damaged by the poor audio quality. Oh, you interrupt the chat. Oh, you go. It's always this.
But do you think it could also be the anonymity of actually writing? But when you actually speak and you have a phone, you can see exactly who it is. Yeah. So people are not as anonymous or feel as anonymous anymore, and therefore they become less brave, perhaps.
Okay, but another angle then. Now in Corona times, to have Teams meeting or whatever we have at work, I think the barrier is, we're through the barrier that they are quite communicative now. They're not perfect. But what's your feeling at work? Do you think that there's a good flow of conversation in your Teams meeting? Start there.
Yeah, much better, at least. I think we still have to do a lot of work in terms of managing the meeting to ensure that everyone is involved.
That's the point, right?
Yeah, and you have to do that early, because otherwise those that are more passive, they will stay passive.
So this is a core problem. If no one is really in our Teams meeting moderating the conversation, it's always a guy like Henrik and a couple of more guys who gets passionate, and the brain shuts off and they become crocodiles, right? Yeah. Stops listening, right? I'm one of those guys. I'm sorry, but that's really true, right? So that moderation to get everybody's voice heard. Yeah, you need to really deliberately work on it.
Yeah, you can do that in different ways. You can ask questions. You can do questionnaires, such as we did with the NLP seminar at Peltarian.
Yes.
And you can use different tricks for that.
So tricks to mitigate that. So now back to the roundtables. Is that different when it's now we don't know each other? With first time we are meeting up, potentially 10 people it's a Teams session, right? But I never seen the guys before.
Well, speaking, and we all have to, live with the Corona situation, and people are getting more and more used to using Teams and remote, video conferencing systems.
Or any other system.
But the question then, when it comes to roundtables in the future, I don't think we will go back exactly to what we had before. No. I don't think we will only have physical things. I think we will combine it with having also remote, because it's a lot of positive things, especially if you look at academic kind of conferences that are super expensive to go to, and you have to travel around the world to come to them. today you can go to one of the top like conferences and pay more or less nothing and listen to so many awesome speakers that you would never be able to do before.
Yeah, I mean, like in the Data 2030 summit that we've had now for 3 days, how many countries?
32 countries.
32 countries.
197 companies, 430 delegates. It was amazing. We had like a...
But that's the point, right? 32 countries. Would you have had that locally in Sweden?
No, never. Actually, it was a two-region conference. So it was for Middle East Africa and for the Nordics. So far, we have been running it in Nordics. So we decided, let's see what is going to happen in the Middle East. And we put them into one event. So I was waking up at 5:30 in the morning, and then basically I did like 2 openings. I did the opening at 6:30 for MEA region, and then I opened the Nordic in 8:30. But you can see as
and
well,
people could choose even to go into.
So it was free, so people can contact each other, etc. So what we stand for is actually like making organization being more mature when it comes to advanced analytics, data, and etc. And one of the key areas here is actually benchmarking between peers, companies, industries, countries, which we have done in the Nordics, and now regions. Because when you see this maturity difference, that is when you start like, okay, we're on the right track, or, oh, I have a lot to learn. And this was actually very obvious here, and it was very, very good. But for the roundtable, coming back to that, in Middle East Africa, they work perfectly.
Isn't that okay? This is a cultural difference.
Yes.
You could see.
Because I told them once, this is how it's going to work. The roundtables are a discussion that needs to be moderated. That means if there is no participants, the moderator doesn't have anything to moderate. So the value of a roundtable is everybody contributing. So if they don't contribute, there is no roundtable. And then comes the moment 24, the catch 24, whatever it's called, right? So the moderator stands. He's waiting for somebody to come into the discussion and have a dialogue. Everybody is now joining passively. They don't want to be part of the conversation. Conversation is not happening. Delegates are now like, hey, this is nothing happening. They're going out of the room. And the moderator is now basically also getting a little bit annoyed because there is nothing to moderate. And, you know, it becomes a problem. And coming back to your thing, you need to moderate it. So we went into the roundtables and started discussion. Today there is nobody in the room. I'm talking. Today we're going to discuss about this and this, bullet points and this, and then some, people will start tuning in.
Active people starting to tune in instead. So
exactly.
So the point was also that they went in as passive listeners to see if this was anything cool.
Yeah.
And then they put on the camera.
Yes, exactly. Because they need that cool of icebreaker type of time to feel comfortable to go in. And I was encouraging, look at me. This is what I said. It's like, look at me. I'm at home. This is my flowers. This is my window. Okay. This is how my desk look like. Just go for it. We have seen all the rooms in the world.
But what's the difference then? Why did it, how can you contrast the EMEA tracks to the Nordic tracks today?
They follow instruction.
They basically,
they understand this is how it is. Okay.
And then they just did it.
Yeah.
While the Swedish or Nordic track was not as...
And very, very forward going. I'm here to learn. They comes in the round table, say like, hey, my name is Muhammad. I'm coming from this and this organization. I'm here in this round table to learn about this. This is my main challenge. Is anybody experiences something like this? It's boom, on the dot.
Well, some people need an icebreaker to be able to start speaking, but someone that doesn't need an icebreaker to start speaking is actually Daniel Rencrantz. Welcome here.
Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
Cheers.
No, but I must say, I think you're one of the best public speakers I've seen, and you have a way of speaking which is a bit unorthodox, but also have a way of engaging people, I think, in ways that, the normal type of public speak, hey, my name is blah, 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 I'm going to talk about this, I'm from this company, and blah, blah, blah. But you have a completely different approach, I think, when it comes to that. And you also work for one, I think, of the most important organizations that we have in Sweden, Vinnova, to be able to really promote innovation in companies. So it's, innovation is actually one of my passions as well. And I think the most important thing we need to do in Sweden. So that's why.
Yeah. So we have many topics that we want to talk to you about.
Anyway, Daniel, very glad to have you here. And perhaps we should start still with just a quick background about yourself. How would you describe yourself?
It's better to listen to the string that bursts than to never stretch a bow.
This is such a typical example.
Now he's
a completely different type of.
Say that again.
It's better to listen to the string that bursts than to never stretch a bow. It's a classic poem from a Swedish poetry. And it was actually presented to me by my aunt in 2009. And the reason for that was that I finished 4 big projects. I'd finished a Swedish classic. I'd done my PhD, finished that. We had built a house and got our first kid. So she thought that was a good representation of me. And for me, that sort of like captures what I want to do in life, to do new things, learn that.
Stretch a little bit more.
And sometimes it does burst, sometimes it holds, then you're in your comfort zone, obviously. But I have sort of like a non-tech background, having done an industrial management degree with then did my master's in Scotland, studying logistics and so forth. And then I, as things happen in life, I went with my to-be wife to Linköping, did my PhD in project and product management. How do you develop complex products? Really complex products. Laser writers, you've probably heard of the company Mycronic in Täby. They delivered the equipment that is used by all LCD production manufacturers in the world, but few have heard of them. And I did a contrast.
You see the light when you pass on E4 north, I think.
Exactly, close to Täby Kyrkby.
Yeah, Mycronic.
Yeah.
Global company in Täby.
Yes. So I compared that to Scania, some completely other companies, because I think it's one of the best tricks if you want to learn. Have the contrast. You have something small compared to something big.
Yeah.
If you have something that is very shiny compared to the darkness. Yeah. So there's sort of like things that have followed me through in my career. So, but apart from that, I'm a big cross-country skier. Started to enjoy that. I was 30 or something, when I did my classic, and I just got hooked.
You got hooked on it. So now you're happy because we've been minus 15 today, or what did you wake up to? I think it was minus 15 at Värmdö.
Something like that. Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? You see the whiteness, and now it's for the first time in 5 years, I can take my car just 5 minutes away during the lunch hour, do some 6 kilometers, something like that.
Which track are you going on then?
Kungsängen. Close to to the army base there.
Yeah.
So really good.
You make me feel bad again because I have basically gained 10 kilos during Corona and have not been, exercising.
Maybe you're a new cross-country fanatic that doesn't know about it. I heard it's very close to karaoke. If you like karaoke, you should like cross-country.
I've never heard that, but okay. If that's the case, then I'm all for it for sure.
But as a challenge, Corona, isn't it? At least in the beginning. Luckily for me, I had my watch talking about AI, and it was sort of like reprimanding me, saying that you're moving too little.
Oh yeah, step counter or stuff like this.
Yeah, exactly. So now I realized I have to walk to work.
Yeah.
So every morning I walk 10, 15 minutes to work.
And what does that mean? 10 around the block and back to your kitchen table?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I'm renting a space in my son's room. 2 crowns per week.
So it sounded cool. I'm walking. I need to walk to work as well. That doesn't mean going down the stairs. It means going around the block. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. And do you think the reason that you actually are doing these type of exercises and having this kind of physical fit is helpful also in work in other ways, or would you encourage other people to do that type of keeping fit as you're doing?
Yeah, certainly for 2 reasons. For me personally, at least, one is the health as such.
Yeah.
It's proven by research that it has a positive impact on handling stress, right. Sharpness and stuff like that. But for me personally, it also gives me an interest to work with data. I have some apps where you can follow your trend curves and try to understand if I work in this way, will I improve my speed or my stamina and so forth. So. Right. For 2 reasons, really.
That's cool.
You can become AI driven by using
AI driven by sports or sports driven by AI. I don't know.
Awesome. So you then were in Linköping, which is a great university. I did go there myself and did my PhD there as well. So that's a nice place to be. And what happened after that for your sake?
Yeah, so I halfway through my PhD, for some reason my wife decided to work in Stockholm, so we moved here, and that's the reason why I started doing part of my research for my chronic, because we moved here. And I also had that fortunate to have a management course for Scania on advanced project management. So I set up a base here, and then I did a postdoc for Linköping University still. But then in the end, it was sort of like a hassle personally to go down there too often. So then by chance, I was doing and ironing my shirt, and my wife said, "Well, here's the ad, read it." And I was like, "Oh."
A job ad?
Yeah, a job ad at Vinnova, the Swedish innovation agency. And I read the title, it says something like handläggare, case of, I was like, no way. I'm not, it sounds dull, doesn't it? Turning papers and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the job ad was not the height of sexiness, so to speak.
Oh, not at all. At least not in my opinion. But I decided, well, I'll give them a call. I felt it was time for change anyway. So
when is this?
2011.
Yep.
Or late 2010.
Something there. Yeah.
So I gave them a ring, and super interesting. Working with innovation system, combining different actors, working in different fields. Because if you look at my background, both in terms of research and education, it's very much been on spanning different boundaries. You could say that I'm a boundary spanner.
Interdisciplinary. What do you mean with that?
Yeah, exactly. Or it could be organizational boundaries. Could be thematical or disciplinary boundaries. For some reason, found it is very interesting to cross those different boundaries.
Intersectional.
Yeah.
Multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
But before we move into Vinnova, because that's interesting in itself, of course, and a lot of people would love, I think, to hear more what they really do and how they work and what you do there, etc. But I still would like to hear a bit more about your PhD and postdoc work and advanced project management. I think so many people.
That's an interesting angle, actually.
Yeah, I think
even
so
for
many,
AI.
Project management is super important, especially in AI.
That's
because so many fail with different AI projects, because it's very different, I think, from different engineering projects, etc. But if you were to just elaborate a bit more what your research focus was within project management, what was your specialty within project management?
Yeah, so this is also sort of one of the challenges. How do you distill that to something very concrete, different models? But trying to explain it was very much on how can you make the prerequisites work if you're going to have a complex project, not just simple products such as a pen is one thing, but if something where you need input from R&D, from manufacturing, and from service already from the start. How can you enable that in an organization? What are the key things for a manager to think about? What are sort of the theoretical constructs they need to be aware of? And one of those that are perhaps a bit fussy, if you're not into that, is, what's knowledge? What does it mean that we have the same understanding of a concept? Is that important or not? Are there techniques where you can lure that out into the open, so you have a discussion on that? And some, very, very simple examples of that could be that you only have one coffee machine. Everyone has to gather around that, and you stimulate discussions, because there are actually some research that shows that the interaction between different people almost comes down to nil. If you're 20 meters away from each other.
Right.
So how can you
How do you do it in Corona times then?
Yeah, that's difficult, isn't it?
But complex project management, meaning interdisciplinary, meaning multi-agenda, meaning, korthuset, a pull here, what happens here.
Yeah, exactly.
Also complex long development cycles, I guess.
Exactly. And not just complex in terms of big number of parts, for example, big number of organizations involved, but also high level uncertainty.
Okay.
So, for example, the customer needs might be hard to predict because it's such it's a volatile market, for example, or you have to set decisions very early on before you even know, what will the customer actually want, and how do you deal with that when they keep changing, for example?
It sounds like a perfect fit for AI projects where you have uncertainties in many different dimensions. Oops.
Yeah, not only the model itself, but actually the project themselves.
Model. Can we get the data?
But I still don't really understand. So it would be fun to just hear, can you give some example perhaps of some project you did, some kind of hypothesis you tried to prove, or did you do some case studies, or how did you actually perform research in this field? I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, so a tiny example then, to make it very concrete, is that how do you ensure that what you learn from a project goes into the next project?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So there's some. Can you have mechanisms for that? Can you have set up a process for that? Mm-hmm. A lot of people find that you run into the same problem on the next project and so forth. So what I did was that I picked up a tool or a process for that that I implemented in this company.
This was Micronics, right?
Yeah, so it was Micronics. I actually stole it from Scania because they had tried it there, and we did that. So basically, what you do in this process is that first you get together the team, you pinpoint what has happened during a timeline, no analytics whatsoever. In this case, we use Post-its, set it up. This was quarter 1, quarter 2, and so forth. And you can, so you go through the timeline and then you highlight what was the most important activities or happenings during this project. Do we agree or not? You have your pen and you highlight the three most important for you. And Anders, you do yours and so forth. And then we discuss this. No analytics really, but just what happened. And you do this by changing from individual reflections. So everyone put up their poses and then you discuss, because otherwise you get funneling into everyone group thinking. Yeah. And after that, you highlight different analytical themes that you find are important, such as one heading could be, what were the pitfalls? Why didn't we achieve what we thought? What were the key success factors? Mm. And then we had a third one was an open-ended one to lure out those things that are hard to determine, So a reflection, how come that, ... Why do we always miss out on our budgets?
To weed out even the harder, more obscure topics.
Exactly. And then you do that also on an individual level, and then on a group level. And then obviously the third step is, okay, what's the action points out of all this? And then if you do this on a regular basis, you will actually get a pattern. So for example, why do we always put out this reflection point? Or didn't we have this pitfall in the last project as well? All right, we need to close the loop to the next project.
So when you said this was a tool, was it like a methodology, or was it actually a tool you used as a framework, methodology of approach to to do retros in one way?
Yeah, so do retros, and then the last step is look forward.
Yes.
So, but for me, it was a twofold. And obviously, it was interesting to know to test this tool at the project. Very much action-oriented research. But it was also a way to actually capture data on this project that I was studying, which are not easy to detect in reports, for example, or in logs or stuff like that.
And I have to ask a leading question. It came out of Scania. So how does that, was that tool part of their lean culture and their lean approaches in Scania, or how was it picked up, or how was it started in Scania? Was it an experiment in Scania? You said you stole it from Scania.
Yeah, at the time at least, it was part of their
method. Stole is a wrong word. It's a wrong word.
Steal with pride.
No, collaborate.
Yeah.
At
the time, by.
Yeah, certainly. But at the time, it was part of their toolbox at the R&D factory up at the hill, if you have been to Scania. Yeah.
Yeah, but because this to me is very close to Scania's heart on lean. Yeah. To have different approaches to really rethink stuff. which is very impressive. It's part of their DNA, I would say, today.
Yeah, certainly. And it was part of, how do we actually have continuous improvement in our work? And what was quite interesting at the time was that they had this and did that during the end of the project. But then what often happens with a project is that you leave it and then perhaps you push it to the line organization, and then a lot of things happen that you don't capture. So what they did was they called it at the time milestone 17, because in their R&D process they had 16 milestones. The 16 was project review, but then they had implemented a 17th one, which was project follow-up. So that was done, I think it was a year or two after the closure. And it was a great exercise that it often gave to newbies or new employees that had the time and needed to know about the process as such. And they were really, the best ones to look at from a fresh point of view. So I think that was a very interesting way to both introduce people, but also to ensure that, what really happened to this, and can we learn something in our project portfolio today.
Before we move on, let's park one topic, because I want to have a topic today where we say, I'm going to put it out there as a cliffhanger, I think projects are dead. I don't think we need projects anymore. I think it's the curse of all evil.
That's
so let's have that as a cliffhanger, and then I will explain myself later.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Okay, to just final or close that kind of topic still with advanced project management. And I guess in Vinnova you see so many people fail many times, and perhaps you can recognize, why did it do it this way, etc. But if you were to give some advice to someone as an expert in project management, and given what you have seen in so many examples now, what are the most common mistakes people do, and how could people try to avoid them going forward?
I think the biggest one, a bit subjective, but my feeling is that we don't fail often enough.
Good. That already.
You are linking back to my statement immediately, by the way.
Well, let me explain. I often, at least when, since
because I fully agree with that one.
I mean, it's a failing fast kind of idea.
Failing fast.
Hopefully that we should do more often, for sure. Yeah.
And I have something to say when I'm at conferences speaking to projects that we fund. I often say, if I don't hear any problems from your project, I think three things. One is you're hiding something.
Yes.
2, you haven't started yet.
Good.
Yeah.
And the third one is we haven't taken the risk that was high enough.
I was just waiting for you. We haven't stretched the bow.
Exactly. That's the third one. And it's so easy to go for incremental innovation or incremental improvement. But, that's what our money is for.
We need to park first principle. Park that one as well. Park it.
Just a second. Awesome. Okay, so your advice would be, we need to be brave enough to fail more often and recognize that.
Yeah. A second advice would be to, think about how can you measure your progress. Sometimes people get too stuck in, we can't get quantitative measures. It doesn't matter, does it? You can have, a quasi-quantitative measures as well. So, for example, if you're doing a customer-oriented project and you have a prototype, one of the milestones could be, capture all the customers, the important key stakeholders at the customers, and they do their thumbs up or down. And if it's, thumbs ups, we have, we're on the right
good
track.
Enough measure, perhaps.
Yeah, sometimes it's good enough, sometimes certainly not. Yeah. But at least think about, what's your theory of change in this project.
And
so many useful.
But this project topic. What is the definition of a project?
Well, a classic one is that you have a clear goal, clear budget, and a clear time frame, and it's something that is a bit special, not in your ordinary processing.
So the project triangle.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this?
Yes.
Yeah, we have all heard it, right? But for the listeners who hasn't heard it, we talk about you have the budget constraint, you have the timing constraint, and you have the sort of, what do we say, scope constraint, typically, or goal constraint. Yeah. So budget would then encompass resources and capacity, so to speak. And then sort of, there's something that needs to give typically in the triangle. Yeah, I like that. I agree with that.
Cool. Yeah, I think so many people need to be better at project management, and I wish that were like a obligatory course in university or whatever kind of school. Better way than it is today, at least. Right?
But it was meant as a joke, to provoke. But I want to come back to this topic because I think
I've written it down. So
let's keep it.
Awesome. Let's move into Vinnova then.
Yes.
And this is, of course, let you instead describe it. How would you describe what Vinnova is and their vision and mission, so to speak?
Yeah, so Vinnova is a state, agency, governmental agency for the innovation system in Sweden, and our mission is to enable, innovation that makes a difference, to ensure that Sweden is a competitive force and is moving in a sustainable direction.
And sustainable can be interpreted in many ways. Can be environmentally sustainable or economically sustainable. What's your definition of sustainable here? What's your thinking of that means?
Yeah, so I think that framework with the 3 pillars is quite good. Economic, social, and green.
Yeah, classic sustainable definition. Yeah,
easy one is good to understand.
Yeah,
if you want to do it more, if you want to do it more complex, perhaps you can have that we do with Agenda 2030 to try to break it down. And it's a very good framework, and it sets the highlight on important different issues that are not just green, or what do we mean by green, for example? It's water and so forth. The challenge sometimes is with Agenda 2030 and that you compartmentalize things. Right. Sometimes it gets treated like 17 different goals that are distinct. So that's sort of like a good thing with the 3 pillars: simple, communicable, but not sufficient as an operational tool.
And for people that don't know how it's operated or funded, this is government funded, right? And can you give some numbers? What's the turnover, or how much do you invest per year and things like that? And how many people are working there? And just give some concrete numbers.
Yeah. So we are approximately 200 FTEs, full-time equivalents.
We all use that. I do too. FTEs. Oh my God.
Can you repeat that? Not the employees, but...
Yeah, so we are roughly 200 FTEs, and most of them are full-time employees.
Do you use that term, FTE?
Yeah, FTE, of course, yes, but not. You said something else than employees, didn't you?
FTE, full-time equivalent. And this is enterprise speak.
Yeah, exactly. So it includes part-time people and consultants as well?
No, we're into FTX.
No, okay. Just our own employees.
So if you're an FTX, you're not the real person, right?
Oh, okay.
FTC, FTE, FTC, FTX.
Yeah. So for 2021, this year, we have a budget in terms of funding projects or initiatives, you should say, because it's not just projects as such. It's 3.6 billion Swedish crowns.
That's a good number, right?
Yeah, so it's certainly a lot of money, and we're so glad we got an increase in the research and innovation bill in last autumn, or really it's the budget really, but it stems from that.
And how does it work from a governmental point of view? Vinnova is sort of it's all money channels through Vinnova. There are several agencies, like we have RISE as well and stuff like that. So what's the Vinnova focus, or is it a difference? Can you put a label on?
Yes, I think we have to distinguish between those that operate in the system and those that support and finance the system.
Nice.
So Vinnova and the Research Council, Formas, the Growth Agency, we are supporting and funding the system as such in different easily put different maturity levels. The Research Council is very much basic research, us in different areas, more leaning towards basic research, but some applied research as well. And then Vinnova is obviously innovation and so forth. Really applied. And then the growth agency is more dissemination, easily put, in a regional perspective on that.
So what do you mean with dissemination and regional perspective?
So they have something called, for example, DigiLifted, digital lift or growth. So how can we ensure that it's things that are very much needed in the system, but it's not innovation. So for example, how can we get all manufacturing firms be more digital? It's not about innovation really, it's about disseminating, ensuring that tools and stuff like that are put into practice.
And just to give the Swedish names for people that don't recognize that, Research Council, you mean Vetenskapsrådet, right?
Indeed.
And growth agency is Tillväxtverket?
Yes.
And Vinnova is Vinnova.
Vinnova is Vinnova. Growth agency sounds cooler than Tillväxtverket, but no. Okay.
It's hard sometimes to understand.
But actually, this is very important to understand the whole ecosystem, and I think that's something that that's why this is really interesting. When we've had the different, we talk about the AI ecosystem, so to speak. So, and how can we move Sweden, and how can I as a startup, or how can I as a company tap into this? And I think I don't know this, and I know quite a bit. And I assume my colleagues don't know so much about this. So this is really good to get this overview.
And I think it's also one of the most powerful and best ways for politicians to actually try to support innovation and really promote economic growth and sustainable growth, you call it that perhaps instead. So I think people should be more aware of this. And I really like that they increased the bill, as you said, recently as well.
It was. How much was it increased, roughly?
For us, if I remember correctly, 550 million Swedish crowns.
That's substantial.
Yeah, substantial and much needed. And it's quite interesting if you look at innovation policy, how that has changed throughout time. And that gives you some perspective of our role. Because if you look at the first generation, it was very much, hands off from the state. It should be market driven. If it doesn't operationalize, if it doesn't fly, that's it. Then we sort of like in the next generation, it was realized, well, things that needs to be done doesn't always happen by themselves. We need some state intervention to improve the system.
And that's an interesting point, state intervention. How autonomous are you as an agency in Vinnova? I guess you have at least some different builds or departments like research and innovation and other parts that are given separate budgets, or?
Yes, so we receive one budget. Okay. And compared to a lot of other countries, so for example, I visited Austria and Japan and so forth, we are very much autonomous in Sweden. For good and for bad. I think it's good in terms of trusting the civil servants, that they have the ears to the ground and have discussions and they know what needs to be prioritized. The problem, obviously, with the Swedish system is the fragmentation.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of initiatives that are bottom up, which is really good in terms of building on commitment, engagement from the actors, from companies, from the public sector and so forth. The problem is sometimes, and that brings us to the third generation of innovation policies, how can you get directionality? Everything that is happening on a micro level is not necessarily moving us as a country in the right direction. Could be big gaps in terms of how could we miss this technology development and so forth. So we must not just improve the system itself. Sometimes we must transform the system. And
but one part of understanding Vinnova now, I'm not sure if I'm going down a rabbit hole, but I'm trying in the context of Vinnova. I really think we should explore innovation policy, and our Vinnova innovation policy setter or executor or facilitator, because I think Vinnova is a key player, at least in the scope of innovation policy in Sweden. So could we understand the innovation policy part? What do we mean with that? What is it? Because I think you have a very, very, very good grasp of this, and I think I don't. Yeah. And I want to learn.
Yeah, certainly. And very easy answer is we don't set policies. As simple as that. As the government.
That's the government, right? So just to make it, this is a good topic, right? Government set policy, and then you are the agency, so to speak.
Yeah, so sometimes we can get tools to work with that. So for example, we have done policy labs sometimes to support, because we're
recommendations of policy setting.
Yeah, because we're sort of like, we're not doing, so for example, if you take the, if you look at the financial sector, for example, we can see and detect that there's a need for innovation, policy innovation here, but we are not an actor as such in that system. But what we can do is to support the agency that are in charge of that area and help them to be more innovative, to set up a policy lab, for example, because that's a concrete example. Because one of the critique towards that agency a few years ago was that, you don't understand the fintech, the startups, the change that is happening in the financial sector with this fast-moving companies with new services. You don't understand us, and the regulation is not suited for us, and so forth. So what we did was that together with that agency, we set up a policy lab because we have the methodology for that. And we had some funding for that agency. So let's get together, set up a process for how can we interact with those so you can understand the needs. And if need be, you can poke then towards the government for new regulation. So that's one example.
So you are then orchestrating or facilitating, I should say, that whatever agency should make policy in some area, but they don't maybe have the know-how from an innovation space, that you help them to shape it because you have the methodology how to go about it, and maybe you have to. Okay, but what do we mean with innovation policy? Sorry, I'm stupid. What is innovation policy?
Is really the rules that sets the game, and sometimes it's the rules and regulation as such. Are they supporting innovations, such as procurement rules, for example?
Interesting.
That's one aspect of it. Another one could be which is a pure innovation oriented regulation that some countries use. One of the most perhaps easiest examples to raise is sandboxes. So sometimes we don't want innovation with the rules in the actual operations because, let's think this through. Rules and regulations are there for a reason. We don't want it to be, the full storm in the actual market. So sometimes what governments do is set up a sandbox saying that in this particular area, with this particular project or this particular set of rules, you are allowed to go outside of that box and experiment. And that is implemented quite differently. But one example could be in housing, where we see that there's need for different kind of houses, but the rules, they are quite explicit in terms of the space that you need to move around for good reasons, for wheelchairs and so forth. But sometimes it makes it impossible to build small flats cheap. So that would be one way to, let's say, we allow you to, within this site, move around these rules to experiment and do research and test. And if it works out, then we might change the rules. So that's called a sandbox, and the different kinds of sandboxes.
So this is examples of innovation policy, or basically policies of how it's okay to innovate, but in a safe way, but still allow innovation.
Yes.
Something like this. Yeah.
Cool. Speaking more about, you have a budget, you are working rather autonomously, but if we get concrete and take some area, let's say AI, why not? And as far as I understand it, you have increased a bit of the focus in that area a bit. But let's say that politicians now, or the government, or someone say, we really want to increase the level of innovation that happens within the area of AI, what can they do with respect to Vinnova? Can they come and ask you to focus more on this, or how does it work?
Yeah, first of all, just to be clear that we have a good relation, so we have a lot of discussion in terms of, because what we as an agency, to be honest, want to avoid is to get an assignment in writing if we can have this open discussion.
Right.
Well, obviously what they can do is to give us assignments saying that you should fund, for example, 50 million Swedish crowns in this area, or you should do a report investigating this or that. So one example of that was in 2018, was it, when they said, here's a government assignment that you should do a report on the state of affairs in the field of AI.
Yeah, together with then you and Dig and a couple of more.
This was before Dig.
Yeah, this was before Dig.
Yes.
Right.
The big report that you basically said if you use AI correctly, you could double the economic growth, right?
Yes. So there was one example. And after that, they did a national approach on AI. And following that led me to set up our more focused initiative on AI.
So, and when you say focused initiative, how is Vinnova constructed? So how do you execute on your mission? Like some organizations, some portfolios? How does it work? Yeah,
so I'll just start in our current organization because we reorganize.
As everyone is doing.
Yeah. So we have 10 different areas. 5 are more challenge-oriented and 5 are more enabling. And each of those areas do a system analysis and do a strategy. Looking at data, speaking to stakeholders, reading other reports and so forth, and then discussing with other agents, and then we're setting a strategy. What's the role of Vinnova in this area? And
what's the areas we're talking about? So I assume AI is one area now, and we are referring to other areas of innovation, or?
Yeah, so if you look at the more challenge-oriented one is sustainable societies, one is sustainable industry, sustainable mobility, sustainable food, and so it's 5 of those. And then the enabling one is, for example, transformative public sector and civil society. Very easy name, right?
Maybe a good acronym. Not even
public sector simply, right?
And one of them is digital transformation, and AI is a big important part
in this
of
umbrella.
Yes.
So we are some AIAW Podcast is part of the enabling portfolio in the digitalization or digital transformation bucket, AI.
Yes.
Okay.
But
and you said you actually did some extra focus on that. Can you just elaborate a bit more on what you tried to do to increase the focus on AI a bit?
Yeah. So we did this big report on AI, showing that this is the potential. When we did a review of our own portfolio, and what we saw was that in almost all program or initiative, you could, regardless if we're talking about mobility, food, and so forth, you could see that there's a lot of AI going into that area. But my view on that was there was a lot of applying AI rather than developing AI. And what at least I saw, when I got this report, when I read it, and then when I was given the task to set up, what's the strategy for us in terms of AI, I saw that there was a lot of gaps there, things that were important for the application areas, but not important enough to be picked up, where we need to not just use AI, but develop it. Right. And the most obvious example of that was natural language processing. And even though I may not have told you, Anders, I during the years when we have had different conversations, that has been part of my agenda to ask different questions. Yeah. So we saw that was a gap. So we need to do something about that. So that's why, and so we set up super simple strategy. We saw that we need to not focus too much on business to consumer, because that's happening by itself to a large extent, but rather in a sustainability. So that's the core, really. Now we saw that there's a problem with data and infrastructure. No surprise there. There's a problem with the innovation capability or competence. And there's a problem that we fund basic research, namely WASP, a lot, but doesn't really get into innovation to the extent that we would like. So can we accelerate research into innovation? So that was the 3 building blocks. And then when we did that, we saw that NLP, or natural language processing, was important to have in terms of expanding that from research to practice. So we funded projects on that. Then on the data and infrastructure side, we've financed the Swedish data language lab, because you can't just have projects. Things need to land somewhere. The knowledge needs to be institutionalized, saved, if you like. And how do we do that? A data lab is a good example. And then in terms of building capacity, we saw that there's too few organizations that do real operational AI projects. They might do chatbots. For some organizations, good. For others, not. But they don't really do that in a too few organizations have been tried. So one of the initiatives that we started there was start your AI journey, where we said that small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as public organizations, you can apply for doing your first practical AI project, where you have identified a strategic business need where AI can be used.
And if someone is listening right now and they're thinking, this sounds really interesting, I'd like to get part in that and start my AI journey, what do they really do? Should they go to the website?
How does it work?
How do they find the actual call? I guess is it open right now? How do they practically do if someone wants to try the journey into AI, so to speak?
Yeah, I think at the moment we don't have a call that is open on that. But what they could do is to contact a good organization that has experience. Well, Peltarian is one. They could hook up to AI Sweden, for example, and organizations such as that. And we have also done a review of the first 30 organizations that did their first AI journey. So that report is available as well. So read through that. But I think that the key lesson really is to start with a real problem or a real opportunity in your organization.
But let's go in here, because we are assuming the people knows what a call is. We are assuming they've ever been to the Vinnova website. We have an assumption that they have any clue how to get money out of. You got 3.5 billion. I want 500,000. What do I do? How do I do it?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's the easiest thing is really. You don't bother about things that I said before in terms of areas, but go to our website, look at the different calls, which we call
What is a call?
Yeah, so a call is a setup where we say that you can, if you're this or that kind of organization, you can apply for this amount of money doing this.
And typically a call has a fundamental theme. So there's something that part of the agenda, what from policy we want to improve on, gets framed down into a call where money is set aside. And then basically, if you wanted to work on federated machine learning type problems, there is a call for this.
Yes.
So maybe we should have a look at the webpage. It's a good one.
Perhaps you can search for the federated learning testbed. I think that's the proper name for the call, even though it's maybe closed.
Yeah, so it's a concrete example, right?
Yes, let's see if we can find it. Or
is it another call that you'd prefer?
I think
I wouldn't go that way. I would actually go straight into the Vinnova website, and how would I orientate myself if I'm really curious?
Then we have a good example. So this is one of the calls that perhaps been closed, but
it's
still open.
Okay.
No, this is the actual project. So if you go back to vinnova.se.
Yeah. So let's go in here. I'm listening to this podcast and I get super excited, and I think this is super cool. But I never really tapped into this world before.
And obviously you can read about Vinnova, but you wouldn't bother about that in this instance, right?
Just want money.
No, we just want money.
Yeah. Exactly.
Come on, show me the money.
So you scroll down.
Where's the money?
And you see, stop, right now, 34 calls for proposals available.
Ooh. No, calls means money, right?
Yeah, that means applying for money.
This is calls. It's a call to apply to be part of projects.
So just to clarify, it's not call for money; it's call for support.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to be a
I'm
little bit
joking.
politically
Sorry.
Okay.
No, we're after work. I'm joking, so I hope everybody can take that.
So here you can see everyone that is either open or forthcoming. So for example, if you look at, individual mobility for applied AI research 2.0. So in this, you can apply for staff exchange. So this is not for an actual project as such. This is either importing someone to your organization, if you like, if I'm crude.
Super cool.
Or you can send someone in your organization abroad to learn more.
So it's actually different ways how you can get support, not only money. We're talking now is also an exchange.
This is very important.
Very cool.
I think this is a topic by itself because we were talking about talent and AI, and we believe that is the key. So let's move on.
Yeah.
I think also the actual calls from Vinnova, if you compare that to a lot of other funding organizations that do exist, both in Sweden and especially in US
way
or
better
in Europe.
way better than most.
I must say that the actual funding process and the application process is actually surprisingly simple. What's your thinking behind, how to make that process as simple as you have made?
It's really a long journey.
You said that you worked quite a bit. This was your last GD's focus was to get this smooth, which is a fantastic focus, by the way.
And perhaps you could call it as, the factory, really. Our key mission here is to ensure that our money makes a difference. And one part of that is to ensure that it's easy to apply. How easy we can make it is another thing, because there are rules that we have to abide to. Yeah. As easy as possible, but also as clear as possible. Yes. You can see a shift there if you go back 10 years and look at the language that we used compared to now. It's been more simplified, and we're really trying. It's obviously hard to ensure that everyone understands what we mean and so forth.
And it is a difference. I know in Peltarion, and you have an academic background as a PhD, and in academia people are used to applying for grants to get the PhDs, but I don't have that. But I'm an entrepreneur. I have some great ideas. I really want to work in collaborative ways. I think I am a perfect fit for this, but it's a fairly big hurdle for me, who is even not a dumb guy, but I'm not academically trained in these. It is a hurdle.
It certainly is.
So this is great what you're trying to do. I mean, like, to make it simpler is really, really important. And also the language.
Yeah, we're certainly trying. Nice. And one of the important questions that you raise now, or topic, is really the target group.
Yes.
Because sometimes we do target researchers, and then it's a different ball game, isn't it?
Yeah.
So one good example of that is the innovative startups, which is coming call.
That touche, right?
Yeah.
That is not typically academics. Maybe.
Certainly not. And what we really are trying to do there is to ensure that the questions that we pose is important for us in terms of evaluating, but also that they can help the startups themselves. So,
to think.
Yeah, to think. If they don't get the funding, at least they have improved their idea, their plan for how to execute on that.
So if you do it smart, you help them sharpen their pitch.
Yeah, certainly.
And speaking about how to make an application, I think a lot of people would love to hear your
examples of
how
to win.
And the good and bad examples. You've probably seen a lot
topic.
of.
Let me get my notebook. I really want to get this right.
How many actual calls do you review yourself?
Record it, Goran. Me and Goran, we've been looking at this and we don't get anything. Record this now. Are you doing it? Yeah.
And to be honest, this is a tricky area to go into. Not in terms of that, I can have a lot of advice. But it's easy to get judgmental or disrespectful without meaning it, because obviously there's a lot of hard work behind each application. Even though we might I wouldn't say frowned upon, but we can see that certainly not good enough to get funding. So that's tricky. But my first advice would be just pick anyone that you don't know from the street and ask them, can I explain my pitch to you in 90 seconds? And if they understand, then you're onto something.
This is what last week we talked about the bar.
The bar test, yeah.
The bar test. It's actually really true. Yeah.
I mean, it's also like, what Einstein says or Feynman says, if you can't explain a topic to a person that's not familiar to it, you actually don't understand it yourself.
No.
I think it's really true in so many ways.
Painful when you're starting something new and you know it really well and you can sell it when you get 10,000 words. It's like but ask me to explain it in 1,000 words. Yeah. Then you need to be really on top of it.
Yeah, certainly. And the next step would be to explain it to a colleague or someone that knows the area. And if you can convince them or at least, make them understand why this is important without too many objections.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a challenge because the more innovative or risk-taking you are, the more objections there will be. So differentiate between understanding objections and operationalize or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And then something as simple as never write an application by yourself.
Right.
No matter how smart you are or how good you are at writing, you will always fall down into, being blind to your own text.
That's a great advice.
And it's
so what do you mean? A friend or even someone who has, even better, someone who's written it before, who knows how to write applications?
That would be my advice.
Because I get really intimidated. I must say, I get intimidated. I've been looking at a couple of them. Now I'm going to write it. And then for some reason, I find excuses not to do it. To me, this is intimidation or something that makes me not, what do you call it? Stretch your bow in this particular area.
Yeah. And
I don't think I'm the only one who thinks like this because I don't know it. It's very far outside my comfort zone.
And I think you can use different techniques there. Personally, if I would do it, I would do, one PowerPoint picture.
Yeah.
Because if you can get the concept in order, then you can start writing.
Oh, so you like a process where you actually try to make a pitch deck in PowerPoint, because then you understand the disposition sort of thing. And then you try to, what would I have said to this PowerPoint? And then you capture wordings like that.
Yeah. And so personally, I would start with the result and then the introduction. Because those are the most important part. The transportation between those.
And what is result and what is introduction in a good application? What should be in there, typically?
So really, what will you achieve? I wouldn't stretch it too far ahead. Sometimes you get people talking about 5-10 years ahead. It's good to have that vision. But
what's the project? Well, if I get this funding, what will I reach? What's the result out of this funding?
Yeah.
Cool. And I'm actually Vinnova reviewer myself, and I've been going through that a number of times. And I remember one example, I saw this awesome application, and I thought, this is a perfect idea, I love it. Unfortunately, it didn't match the call at all. And it was so annoying. I was trying to convince the other people, you can see this is how, super high impact, it may not really explain, how it matched the actual call, but you see the point. And everyone, but, this is not the right call for it. Sorry.
That's sad, isn't it?
It's super frustrating.
So this is important also to truly match. Okay, so how do I read the call to what are the triggers where I understand? I mean, I need to know how to read, right? But the call to me, that's almost right. But you need to be quite sharp on the target of the call.
Yeah, and I think an important question to pose to yourself is that, is it worth it? If I don't get funding, is it worth putting in this effort? And if the answer is, doubt.
The call is not really sharp, so I'm winging it. No, then it's not. But this is my call. Then of course it would be worth it.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, one of the really, at least in my opinion, and I probably reviewed I don't know how many thousand applications now.
Yeah,
the most common mistake really is not to use the spacing in a good manner. Obviously, different calls have different setups, but what you often see if there's in a section on what's the background, what's the state of the art, and a lot of people when they apply, they explain the idea as such, but there's a different section for that, and you haven't really positioned your idea by comparing your idea to the state of the art or state of practice.
So they haven't done their homework in some way to really compare to what's out there otherwise and do the background research.
And the format is such to really follow to really understand what this section's purpose is all about, is to compare and contrast. Now here is where you tell your story.
I have a question. Is there a best practice that people can actually get from Vinnova? So for example, this is how you do a pitch. This is how you do a slide deck.
This is a nice deck. This is a good example of a winning.
Because we can understand that not many people are as you said, like comfortable or not versatile in order to create those type of even the difference between you sending a proposal and sending a Ramaftal, right? Like
RFQ.
It's a mastery by itself, right?
Yeah, I'm kick-ass.
So
for
do you
Ramaftal.
have any? You need to help some. Otherwise, they need to hire lawyers to write that, and that is 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 crowns, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because on the one hand, I would love to say, yes, this is sort of like how you do it, more in an operational term. But there's also a big pitfall there because if you follow someone else's recipe, you might, be deviating from your idea or, the best way to do your project or your application. Yeah. And you might also deviate from the actual call because it's different between different calls, really. How you write a good application for an innovative startup and how you write a good application in terms of we are 15 organizations that are going to cooperate by building this awesome data lab, something different. But the general, tips
in general,
and ideas.
Yes.
Other than what we have, said now, ensure that you actually answer the questions and so forth.
Classic.
But there's a lot of general advice out there that you can find. What's a good pitch? A, B, C. You can find that. Yeah. But what I would perhaps state that is not so obvious that a lot of applications fall on is how do you position your idea? A lot of them have great ideas, but if I Google for 5 minutes, I can often find, there's 5 solutions already out there, or there's already 1,500 research articles or 500 patents on this topic. So I think, have a structure in the way that you do your, your review of both state of the art in terms of, for me, that's research, and state of the practice. You can do that by just Googling or using PRVs, the Patent Bureau of Patents. They have a great tool where you can,
So it really shows that you understand or are humble about your idea in the context of the world.
Yes, but
it's of course obvious.
But it's a little bit of like you're not helping them if you provide the general guidelines, okay? Because if the idea is bad, you will see it, right? But not many people will actually start, if you sit and Google and find like 5 competitors, of course they should be to do the business canvas from the beginning, right? But in the same time, there will be a lot of minimizing time for your review if people actually, you give them guidelines, they're like, hey, if you find that 5 people are actually, doing this, you should state that. So at least right? So you don't have to Google that. So I don't think that there is something wrong is actually providing general counsel in how they should look like, but not the specifics, because bad idea is a bad idea. Good idea is a good idea, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Just because, we get speakers, right? And it took like 2 years for us to create like a form that will make them to sharpen up their speaker offerings. So a title, subtitle, what is this conference, what is this session all about? Key takeaways, for whom it is it a business, technical, or organization wise? So just basically to guide them to structure it, because when I read it, I immediately know, okay, this is not for us, this is good for us. So it's basically a health tool for you as well, somehow. And not many people are very sharp to actually do that. Imagine you're a 25-year-old, you have a great idea, but you don't know how to structure this.
Perhaps it could be a new service for Vinnova or something to have like a trainee school or something, how to write an application,
AI
how to pitch your idea.
But many people will pay for it. I would pay for it.
I would even pay for it too.
I would pay for it.
But there are, as you said, there's actors on the markets. There's a balance between, are we going to be both, the accusator, the judge, and the defender?
That's a good one. That's a good. You need to find your spot as well.
Cool. And I love the phrasing you said, state of the art we all know, and basically connected to research in many use cases. But I haven't heard about the state of the practice kind of thing. But I really like that concept.
That's a good one.
So it's a good term. Any upcoming calls that you feel extra excited about that you can perhaps talk about?
Well, obviously, as I mentioned before, we're in a strategy process now. Personally, with respect to AI, I would love to see, and we are in the planning phase. I can't say it's not confirmed, but we are looking at data labs because that has been, in my opinion, something very important. So we're looking at 2 tracks there. One is we have 16 labs that are up and running, or at least they're working. Can we do something to accelerate those, especially those with big potential, to make sure that they're not just good, but excellent? So that's one track. And the other one is to look at, all right, we have these 16 labs. What are we missing in the portfolio? So one example, which links to another track, is AI in the service of the climate.
Climate, yeah.
So we have that call with Formas that is upcoming. It's more research oriented, but there's, what we can see is that there's always a challenge with data, isn't it? Yeah. But good climate related data is one that we could, benefit from. So I think that's one example where we would like to see something.
I think the data labs are really great, but if I were to give some advice, it's also about, how to truly operationalize them. I mean, how to take, even if you have a data set, it's not sufficient sometimes. Even if you have a model, it's not sufficient sometimes. Even if you have a code base, it's not really sufficient. But to really learn and be able to, understand the best practices, so to speak, of how to bring value into your organization. I think a lot of companies
let's take 10 minutes to pitch. What are now we flip it a little bit because
we pitch him.
Let's discuss a couple of topics. Why don't we have calls on this that is completely missing in the opinion of Henrik and Anders?
Oh, we have so many topics. You spent an hour already just speaking about Vinnova here.
No, but I mean, I let me pitch one then.
Okay.
Bring it on.
And Anders, I'm used to putting the knife where Anders started to rip it. Operationalizing AI is so much more than data, open data and models. And you can have a week's discussion on operationalizing AI, what that really means. And we have already understood that it's quite much more than the model itself. So the whole idea that, I need to hire data scientists to do a model. That was sort of, for the people who's been in a journey, we are past that in 2016. Most of the people in Sweden has not passed that, by the way. And then we have people who are talking about, you need to have all this stuff around data engineering. So you need to understand how you operationalize AI. And this is where the conversation is right now, and we talk about data ops, so we're talking about not the open data or data lab, but actually what are the ways of working and processes. And then we come to the next level where actually that is not enough either, because you need to operationalize AI from a business perspective. How do you commercialize AI? And the core topics that we end up with is that this is a huge interdisciplinary topic, number one. Number two, forget about driving this as a project, because it doesn't work like that anymore. It works, continuous learning and iteration. It's about drip feeding and maturing. So it's a completely different operating model. It's a completely different governance. So, I can go on forever, right? So,
I know.
So I stopped there. So where is the topics how you apply for topics that really makes a difference, so I can take AI on. So there's not a technology problem we have in Scania or Volvo or in Mycronic. It's the fundamental ways of working problem we have. It's an orchestration problem we have. And I haven't seen one single call on the orchestration problem. That's the real problem, in my opinion. So that was my...
Well, what we have done, I can say, because I totally agree. And that was one of the reasons why we, just before summer, made investigation into that. So we have funded some researchers at Chalmers and Mälardalens högskola to look into innovation management practices in relation to AI. Because if you look at that area, they're really just separated in terms of research, aren't they?
Yes.
AI and innovation management. We really need to start linking that together.
Yes.
And one interesting example I heard of, because when we did our Elements of AI at Vinnova, we did a study circle on that, invited external guests. And one of them was from Arbetsförmedlingen, the employment agency. No, it was Försäkringskassan. So it was so interesting to hear about this connection between technology and management, because they had digitalized a lot of their services. So, for example, if your kid is sick, you can do that yourself, right? So what you saw that a lot of people in all ages of group had a bank ID, so they could do that. And the number of calls that went into the first line support went down rapidly. So all of a sudden you have, I think it was 1,100 employees in the first line support that was dealing with devilishly difficult questions, because the easy ones they could solve themselves. Now they have all the hard questions. So now they had to reorganize in terms of, let's reduce the first line support, bring them back, reskill them, bring in technology to the first line support with the help of AI. They haven't solved this yet, so they can get automatic transcription of the actual discussion with the client, to get suggestions on what questions to pose, and then get direction to what are the key documents to look at. Obviously, they're not there, but it's a good example of that interrelation.
But I think this is, sorry for being a little bit like this, but this is a true passion. If you want to operationalize AI, you need to put this in context. So then we need to have other types of funding for other types of learnings. But maybe we
yes, I think we have so many topics we wish to bring up.
So we will
never manage to cover them all, but let's go a bit back to basic, I think. And perhaps, we've been speaking about innovation for a long time, but do you have a preferred definition of what innovation really is?
I tend to go to the 4 N's in Swedish.
4 N?
Yeah. So let's take it in Swedish first, right?
Okay.
It should be something nytt.
Nytt.
It should be something nyttigt.
Nyttigt.
Oh, love it.
Och det ska nyttiggöras.
Nyttgöras.
Och det ska vara en nyhet.
Nyhet.
What do you mean with that?
Vad är nyhet?
What's that? It's timing, isn't it?
Ja, timing.
Alltså, är det nytt en nyhet?
No, it's not a
It should be something new, right?
Fresh.
It could be really new,
but it's a window of opportunity.
It's a window of opportunity. You have to
be ready for now. It should not be something that's up for 10 years. It should be something that works today.
No, I mean, I want to do training in deep learning. I tried to sell it in 2 years ago. Not so many. They wanted Power BI training. So the window of opportunity, not really for a mass market deep learning course.
For me, that's just a way of framing it, that you have to think about, how do we either create that window of opportunity or at least try to spot it.
Yes. The timing of anything is quite important. But let's now translate them, because they are fantastic, by the way. Say them again, and I try to find.
Okay.
Say
so, okay. Go ahead, Anders.
You go.
No. Nytt then, so it should be something novel or new.
Novel
right?
or new.
Yeah. Should be nyttigt, so useful.
Useful,
right?
So now we go building an acronym.
Nyttiggöras. Yeah, okay, I don't know what that will be. Nyttiggöras. How do you translate that?
Useful.
But that
Put into practice.
Put into practice.
Put into practice. So NUP. Let's go.
It's going to be a bad acronym.
Bad acronym.
And nyhet. So
Window
actual, or is it something relevant for today?
Timing.
I think that's
Timing, yeah, could be.
Timeable.
Obviously,
I'm playing with words in Swedish because it gets
Vad blir det? Nupnt.
A novel, useful timing and put in practice. Yeah, something like that.
Operationalized.
Operationalized, yeah.
Go back to operationalized. Used to use that. We have already sort of talked about that.
And obviously, there's a lot of innovation models. If you want to dig deeper in terms of, is it new for your organization, new to the sector, new to the world? Is it radical or incremental? Is it technical, or is it a process or service, or what? So there's different ways to, if you want to, dig deeper. But I think, that framing initially is sufficient enough for most.
But is innovation, okay, so let's now dissect this a little bit, because let's talk about the words innovation, let's talk about the word improvement, and let's talk about the word research. So on the one hand, what is the difference between R&D, research? Is that innovation or not? Does that fit the same criteria? And then this incremental improvement we are doing, is that innovation? I guess in one way it is, or do we have do we distinguish innovation differently in relation to research and improvement?
I would suggest so, yes. So research for me, if you look at it from a sort of like a true sentence, is about generating new knowledge. That new knowledge in itself could be, done in a new way, then it's perhaps innovative. But then when you take that knowledge and put it into practice, then is when it turns from an invention or a good idea into some, an innovation.
So innovation has it's closer to applied in practice, putting something, and innovation should go into practice, while research could be for learning to then put the innovation into practice. Is something like this. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like what you said, the definition of research. I think that's a better one, or a very good one in general. The goal or the purpose for research is really to build knowledge.
Yes.
And the purpose for engineering or development is to build a product.
Yeah, and the purpose of innovation is nupum.
But I think that innovation can happen both in research and engineering. So it's like another dimension.
Of course they are all intermingled. But is improvement not innovation?
Generally speaking, I would suggest no, because that's more of a continuous operation, continuous improvement. That's what I link that word to.
Yeah.
So your daily operations, how can you improve that? Often small adjustments, and you can have that extremely process oriented. Whereas innovation is about trying at least to take a bigger leap, taking a bigger step.
I hate to bring up the Henry Ford quote again, the faster horse kind of thinking. Yeah. So I think because it's been misused so many times, and
because in one way this is all semantics, right? But it's also trying to, when we say innovation policy, we are trying to do something else. So now let's link it to another one. I put to you that the topic of innovation is more linked to first principles thinking than to improving on what you have. I think this is another dimension.
Before we go into that, do you have an idea of what do you think when you hear the term first principle? It would be very interesting to hear what you think. Have you heard or have you thought about that?
Not too much. If you expand on that, and then I'll ride on your thoughts.
Yeah, and so there are so many ways to talk about this. We all love and prefer whatever Elon Musk says is the truth. No, sorry, I'm kidding a bit. But what he basically did when it both comes to Tesla and perhaps also SpaceX is, really courage to challenge the norm, challenge what people say. This is the way you should do things. If someone says, if you build a rocket, you can, make it go up in space and then you throw it away. And then you can challenge them and say, why? Why can't you land them again? And then people say, no, that's impossible. That can never happen. And then you start going to the core principles of either physical laws or business laws or technical laws or whatever kind of first principle you're thinking about, and seeing, okay, if we want to build a rocket, why can't we do that? So for one, first principles, to me at least, is about having the courage to really challenge the norm of doing something, and doing that challenge by looking at the core principles. You know, if it's something you build from a physical point of view, well, then look at the physical laws. If it's something from a technical point of view, then see, you know, how do you really build a AI model that needs to have a REST API that can be used in a super scalable, nice way? Well, look at what technical core principles are and see, can you do it in a different way? Challenge the norm.
Yeah, and the business perspective of first principle can be what Volvo is doing now with mobility, right? So are there core, what is their core principle? Is it truly to build cars, or is it transportation? You know, so what is my core business? Is it this building cars, selling cars, or is it that you can rent a car and you can have it as a subscription? Why do I need to own a car? Is the ownership of a car that I sell a car to you? Well, that's the business model we have today. But if you strip down what is Volvo to the core, and then you build it up again, and then you end up in M.
Yeah.
So innovation for me is also a little bit like improvement. You have not really challenged the core you haven't challenged the paths you have on. You haven't sort of stripped down to the core and gone another direction. So so when you say that, how do I distinguish between innovation and improvement? I think the innovation part is you can do innovation of process, but then you're reinventing the process. So we have analog processes everywhere. Do I computerize on top, or how do I rethink the innovation within the process with an automation first, as an example?
Well, awesome. I think first principle thinking is something that can help a lot of companies to become more innovative. And I'm sure that.
So it seems, what do you think? So we've been elaborating on this.
Yeah, certainly, and it's so important topic, isn't it? Because if you don't have that kind of thinking, what could happen is that you get run over.
Yeah.
You know, you're out of the game suddenly without realizing. And just look at the Fortune 500 list.
Yeah.
Not a lot of companies stay on that for more than 5-10 years, and that's why it's so important to have a structured approach to innovation. Doesn't mean that you kill creativity, but you actually spur that and direct that deliberately in a direction. So, for example, you could use a method called 4 horizons to see what we are hearing now in the first horizon.
Yeah.
Let's move to the fourth one.
Yeah.
What are the potential crazy ideas that could come up? And then you can use obviously methods to, delve on that and dig deep into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephen Vlachos, sorry. Sorry.
Now, just to close the topic of innovation, one is to try to understand what it means and different ways to become innovative, and then thinking about organizations. And, I've been working in a number of companies in the past, and I'm always trying to fight for, how can we be more innovative? And it's so hard sometimes to make that happen, I must say. And so easy for companies to just think about, the next quarter or the next month kind of iterations or the sprints that you have in your Scrum board or whatnot.
Exactly.
And to become truly innovative, I would argue you need to look beyond that and at least have a number of alternatives and look a bit more longer ahead. And for me, at least, it's really hard for a lot of companies to make that happen. What's your thinking? How can we make more Swedish companies become more innovative?
I think it starts with management, really, to have an understanding of innovation and, to understand their role in that, how they can really kill that, by
asking,
operating in that way.
Quarter.
And, what's our innovation management system here, really? And what I at least see is a lot if you have, you have KPIs and so forth that are, directed towards the presence.
Yes.
And that's an interesting discussion now on we need OKRs, objectives and key results. That captures the change that we want to see, not just the status quo or what's the quality in our production, but what's the change that we want to see and how do we measure that and to challenge that. I think that's something that's so important for management to actually be aware of that and, discuss those kind of topics. And it's hard, isn't it? Being a manager where you're responsible for delivery today.
Yes, exactly.
And for the future of tomorrow.
So thinking about, because this is really one of the core challenges, I would say, because you have people that are responsible to say, I'm going to deliver, this sprint in 2, 3, 4 weeks, for doing that. And if they fail doing that, that's a big problem for them. And then, how can you still be innovative if you still have this kind of daily kind of requirements on you? So one of the thinking we've been speaking about before is this kind of idea of having centralized versus embedded kind of, if we take AI now, like data science department. So you can think about even having data scientists being embedded into a product team, building some part of some product or service, or you can think about having a centralized team that work independently of them. But then there is cons with that as well, since they are disconnected from what's really happening, and it's hard to convince and move that into production. And do you have any thinking about that? If you just focus a bit on the organization of a company and how teams should be collaborating in some way to just get away from this problem of, just looking at the next week's deliveries, so to speak.
Oh, that's a tricky one, isn't it?
But you're an expert in advanced project management here, so that's your PhD.
I would have to, perhaps a blurred answer, but I would say you have to be ambidextrous, meaning that you have to have both ways. Sort of like a matrix, and everyone knows that has worked in a matrix. Oh, it's hard work and it's tough, but I think that's the answer really, because the problem, or the upside of having a data scientist department that can work on their own is that you let that creativity unleash, don't you? But if they are too much embedded in the operation, creativity dies and daily operations. Yeah. But there are really ways that you can, have a mix there where you have this central team, but they are not there 100% of the time, or at least not 100% of the year. But you get that, learning, that, knowledge building in that group where they have, this task or mandate or must to be inspired outside of the organization, because, so little in our organization happens within the walls.
Yes.
But that team could then go outside and, be inspired and take that inspiration back, but to have that grounded in actual operations.
Cool. And we only have half an hour left.
So
I'm trying to get really selective
to the next
now.
Topics. Let's go for it.
And I love your answer, by the way. Having some kind of hybrid organization for that is actually what we did in Spotify as well. And I think it's the best way to go as soon as you pass a certain size, at least. Awesome. I'm really trying. Okay, so I'm going to list a number of topics here, and you can select a bit what you prefer to speak about. We only have like 30 minutes left, so I was thinking potentially AI Sweden, talking about that, because that's a significant investment from Vinnova. We can talk about, challenges becoming AI ready, but I think we touched about that a bit. I love to speak about public speaking, which is one of your expert topics, which would be fun to just at least briefly speak about. If you have any tips or can speak about how you do it so well as you do, because I truly think you do.
That's a good topic, I think, as well.
Cool. Let's move that to top then. We also have this kind of fragmentation problem that you mentioned a lot, both in Sweden from a national point of view and also from a more regional point of view, but also I would say from a European point of view, which is even more fragmented. That's a hard one, and perhaps even not super interesting. Regulation is another one that would be fun.
But we have talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah, true. The AI divide, I think and your topic, the projects are dead. I think we should try to.
It's just because when I used to latch on to your PhD, and when you see projects and you work at, so I just want to.
And then we have the general one about singularity and AI divide, etc. But let's start with public speaking then, if that's okay.
Yeah, right? Sure.
Yeah.
And once again, having seen a lot of speakers, and I think we all have, and Goran here is I think the foremost experts in criticizing public speakers. But I think you do it extremely well, and it's always so engaging and fun to hear you speak. So what's your thinking behind it? How do you think when you're going to try to give a public talk and really make people, engage and listen to what you have to say? How do you do it?
Can I start with 2 examples?
Yes.
Real life examples of introductions that I've done. All right. The first one, Santa Claus, Hitler. Guess the third one. Have you seen that famous TV show with Aftershave and the Galenskaparna? Do you remember Harry Dime and his coach where he linked different... So there was one example.
Santa Claus.
Awesome
Hitler.
opening, yeah.
The second example then. War in Syria, porn war between different cities. The news today was certainly not a good one, but here we are, and so forth. So what I see is as my obligation is to make the best of my minutes and focus on the introduction and the closure, and if I have time, the passages between different sections. If I fail in the actual sections, no one will really bother, or they might do, but that's okay. But if I can get something that really catches the audience early on, that has relevance for the topic, and then make sure that if the first section is about, for example, AI divide, and then I want to move into policy, it should be a smooth transition, something logical that links that together, and then have a good closure.
Mm-hmm. So a structure here: start, end, transition. Is if you're short of time and someone needs to. Yeah, I need a presentation. I start with. Okay.
Yeah.
Tip number 1.
I really...
this is super interesting.
Yes.
Wait.
Okay.
Let's start with this. How much do you prepare before the presentation, and how do you do that?
Honestly?
Because...
No, please lie to us.
Because there are 2 types of speakers. Okay, there are people that are so confident and they will basically just wing it. Okay? Henrik is one of them. He can speak to whoever,
I don't
however.
wing it.
You don't wing it. You prepare very much, but you don't, for example, ask who is in the room. I have never heard you ask me like, Goran, who's going to be in a room?
But I know.
But you know, right? But you never ask for it, right? So you basically, you just prepare, but you don't know.
Okay.
So just basically, it's not a negative thing, because you will kill it. You did a presentation today. It was beautiful, right? Everybody loved it. But how much preparation do you do before the event? Because there are 2 types of presenters. So I'm very interested about this.
Due to reality, the harsh reality that
cross-country skiing goes first.
Exactly. I generally speaking don't have a lot of time to prepare. So that's why I'm fortunate that I, 10 years ago, something like that, said that I need to develop my toolbox in terms of different kind of openings. So for example, one is to pick up something from the news, just one example, use a poem or, question introduction where you pose an important question or something like that. So I have a sort of like a toolbox that I have in my back of my mind. And that means that I don't have to prepare that much as long as I'm know the subject that I'm going to speak quite well.
So why do you start like that?
I think it's something that I try to break a pattern. If everyone else were to do it, I wouldn't. Yeah. But really, if I'm talking to the head of the ministry, for example, or to Anders or whoever, if I know them, if we're at Vinnova, that's one thing. But I have so little time to capture their attention.
Yes. So it's control.
Yeah,
mechanism.
Really.
Yes.
It's a way to suck them into, now you're listening for real.
Yeah. You remember when we did, me and Henrik did a trick. So Henrik ordered a coffee and a milk.
Yes.
And then we went on stage, and I have a picture of this. And then he started mixing. He didn't say anything. He started mixing the coffee and the milk. And everybody was, what the heck is going on?
I didn't say anything. I used 1 glass of milk, 1 glass of coffee, and then the whole audience, and everybody's there, and he started pouring.
Yeah.
They was
So it's a great tool to start with a control because people need to snap. So beautiful. Continue.
But sometimes it backfires, doesn't it?
Yes, that goes the preparation about who is in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the thing.
And as a PhD I did it once, I said that, imagine that you were a project manager at this firm and you had 3 hours and I went on just short introduction. And I said, best of luck. And I left the room, I said, everyone, started, should we do this task now or what? And it was a good opener. But then at the one conference, the moderator didn't understand it. So he was so stressed. He went up on stage and I came back and it was like, he couldn't, grasp that I was back and it was part of my show. So it backfired.
No, your session is over. You had your 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
But tip is to have some structure how it works, how it hangs it up, and you have your little bank of strong openings.
Yeah,
that sucks people in.
Yeah,
and breaking the mold is one key aspect of it.
Yeah, certainly. And I never write a detailed script. Never.
Not even for the opening?
No. Because I don't want to get caught up in having to follow a script because, things happen when even I get a lot of nerves sometimes. And if I have a script, then you can get caught in that process, that cognitive process. But rather, obviously, sometimes I rehearse the opening because that's sort of like the way in.
But you have your slide or your keywords so that's your topic, right? But then you rehearse it, so it becomes more and more tight. But there is not a perfect word, I agree with this 100%.
Yeah. And I like, to go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
How important is energy?
Oh, that's super important, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, it's one of those things that if you're listening to someone, everyone can't be a theatrical monkey, obviously. That's not the point. But being passionate about what you're talking about and trying to get across. Because normally, if you get me on my private side, I would be a bit more mellow. But here, it's my obligation.
But it's interesting because your body language from when we were sort of preparing, before the camera went on until actually we had the first introduction, and then your body language changed when you asked, and could you introduce yourself? Who are you? I this is super professional.
Yeah, it's
and I actually, me who has been around this, like, holy fuck, he changed he snapped into energy, which is really, really important. And I just wanted to highlight that go back, you listeners, and look at the start today, and you will see what happened when Anders asked, and you snapped into character.
It was also that we spoke too much in the beginning. But that's another point.
He was bored. So he was bored because he was listening to our bullshit. That's another point.
So let's end this. So we started with a control. So do you follow, for example, kidney shape of walking on the stage? Like, so you keep the momentum on. Do you have any tips and tricks for presentation slides? Do you use a lot of slides? How many slides? What is your maximum slides that you use?
I think I can vary that a lot, really. But there's one thing that I try to always avoid is a lot of text.
Yes.
Because you risk the confusion, to get the audience confused. Should they read the slide? Should they listen to you? Or so I try to get something that they can use as a memory board, when they come home and, he was talking about that. And if it's super important for me, for them to remember what I actually said, I will have, in the rare occasion, I will have 2 sets.
Yes.
One that I use on the stage and one that is published afterwards.
Yes.
That is quite
We usually ask for 2 slides because most of the slides that are coming are vetted from the PR.
Yeah.
So you cannot use them in any case. So it's great.
Slides is very interesting, and of course, avoiding the wall of text I think is super important, and it's such a newbie mistake to have that. But then when it comes to pictures, it can also be overdone in some ways, and there is this concept of mood pictures, or where you have pictures that doesn't really say anything when it comes to the topic you're speaking about, but it's supposed to bring people in some mood, happy, mellow, whatever. And I actually, what's your thinking about having pictures that is not really, visualizing what you're speaking about, but just have like other purposes? Or
first of all, I've done that myself. I think it has to tie in some way or another to what you're saying, rather than just getting a feeling. That's my my view anyway. But it could be linked not just to the specific topics, but to your key message, really.
So the picture is a metaphor or like strengthening the key message. Like sometimes you want to talk about that, but it's really about change. Yeah. So can I then find a picture that symbolizes change? That works.
Exactly. Or if we talk about, there's a lot of fragmentation, a lot of uncertainty. You might be able to use a blurred picture that is about, the fog in the landscape, something like that.
Yeah.
But you have to be, if you do that, you have to ensure that you link your presentation or what you're saying to that picture, because otherwise the risk of confusing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we call it the support tool, because the presentation, as you said, the eye should be on you. The presentation should be just in amplifying what you're saying. Errol Kuhlmeister is actually quite good in this. He chooses pictures that would just amplify one key point. He doesn't write it, so just basically it's one word. Amazing. Right? It's like time for change and things like that. And then just to reinforce it a bit, because the presentation slides are about that. I had like speakers that are sending me for 30 minutes around 44 slides. That is a stroboscope. That is not a slide. Okay?
No, it's an animation. It's an animation.
It's a stroboscope, because people just basically blinking what happened, right? And you can see the delegates, because I sit there on the sides like, okay, this is not going well. This is not going well. And then you can see the person just clicking. And then people are like, okay, which slide are we on? Because, and the focus, he is just disappearing in this.
Yeah.
Okay. So good. So first of all, when did you start not preparing for... you prepare, but not basically, oh my God, I'm stressed about this, because there is a tangible time when you say like, I know how to do this now, right? So when did you stop fully preparing, with the stress and all of these levels?
I think, if you look at it, if I have tried for 10 years or so to, consciously work with my presentation technique, it probably took 5 years or something like that, I would guess. And then I had the toolbox, and then also I had gotten into a position where I didn't have the time.
No.
Whereas as a PhD, although you have tons to do, you still have more time than as a manager today.
Yeah.
Last part. How do you close?
Good.
And this is a question for you as well, because you are very quiet about this, and you're a public speaker as well. So you're trying to be shy here, and I have heard your presentation. So this is a question for you as well, Anders.
Yep.
So how do I close? Do you want to specify that question or
Yes,
give an example?
So let's call it like best practice: summarize, key learning points, majestic closing, like something like, to pump up people, a little bit like more like... or just basically, hey, here is we are hiring, or standard like contact.
You have your toolbox for opening.
So usually the closing is very specific to a person, and when you see it, if you've worked with the person, I will know exactly how the last slide is going to look like. Right? So, and all of them are positive, but everybody has their own slide of closing.
What's your closing toolbox or your closing style?
It's a CTA, right? It's a call for action. So what kind of a close of action do you have?
I think I do have a variety there, but what I try to do, at least, if I succeed or not is another matter, but I try to give a punchline that is action-oriented, but it must link back to the opening.
Yes. Okay.
It's the whole fish rhetoric. Tell them what you're going to tell them piece by piece, tell them what you told them.
Yeah.
Simple. That's one example,
You could also call it hidden repetition.
Hidden repetition.
And what do you say, Anders? You have listened to me a few times.
No, Anders needs to answer for himself, because he's also doing how many presentations do you do per week now?
Not per week. I mean, in Corona times it's not as much, but before Corona it was a lot. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So your way of closing. And then we can close the topic so we can move on. I think we have been very good. 15 minutes.
Yeah. No, but of course, something encouraging is really, something call to action, something saying, this person says, and you can have some really inspiring words. If we do this right, here is what can happen. Simply to have something really inspiring to let people rethink, if you do this right, it's this awesome thing is going to happen. Something like that.
And Henrik, the last. I know your slides, so.
I always try similar structure to what you highlighted, focusing on the opening, the transition. I always even looked at each slide as what's my key message on this slide? Also, what's the opening? What's the key message? What's the transition message to the next slide? So if I have 10 slides, I actually know exactly how I go through that. The rest is, I know the topic, right? And then ultimately, I don't know if it's Aristotle, Plato, or what the fuck it is. It's the fish, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them piece by piece. Tell them what you told them. So you put an executive summary in with the value proposition, and with the value proposition outlines the key topics, and then you move into the key topics and you do that. Then the way I do that is different, right? So sometimes I do a very formal agenda. Many times right now, I don't do an agenda on purpose because I don't want them to really know where this is going, right? So it's also a little bit like if you tell a story, once upon a time, you don't let people kind of look at the different chapters. It's ruining the story, right? So storytelling. So what's a good starting point? What's a good story and has a peak? And what is the ending, right? Key message, typically key messages and a call to action, typically.
Yeah, we could speak about this forever, I think. And, should we put humor into some of the slides and things like that? But okay, let's close this topic.
But linking this is important. If we want to do data and AI, if we want to convince people who doesn't know and understand the topic, it's not their home. We're taking people outside of their comfort zone, maybe competence-wise or whatever. We're talking to bosses, and it's, we need to be good at this. I think it's key.
I think it is. Communication is so underrated, I think. And if you look at Americans that got trained in school so much more than Swedish people do, and it's a bit sad. I think public speaking should be taught much more than it is in Sweden.
And especially on a nerdy topic.
One question that really helped me personally was, when I started to post the question, if you listen to someone and they are trying to do a good presentation and they don't fully succeed, do you judge them or not? And then you pose that question to yourself. If you do that, do you judge yourself or not? And for me personally, I was much harsher on myself. But when I saw someone else that was, really trying to do a good job on stage, and it didn't fully succeed, at least I appreciate that. And getting that external perspective on myself was something that helped me.
Yeah, I still remember Adam Kava, one of the best speakers I've seen, at least, and he keeps speaking about how he fails all the time. And he builds up so much trust by being so honest and transparent.
The victim model, right?
Yeah. Okay, but let's
speak on this in the afterward. The victim and the winner model. I think that is so cool.
This is the afterward. Okay, cool.
It's actually how this podcast is based, because now we go to about that
new topic.
Okay, Henrik, this is your topic. The projects are dead. What do you mean with that?
So, I think, looking at where the tech stack is going, and we talk about agile, and we talk about DevOps, and we talk about, this is one angle, that the traditional approach of something starting and stopping is gone. So, and even to the point where I today work very, very hard in my day job at Scania to change an operating model from this is static line process, this is project, different people working in projects versus line, to having a cross-functional DevOps team that runs process as product continuously. And basically being able to have the redundancy to develop as we go along. And concretely, this is how I run, this is how we run a 1 billion SEK implementation of ERP across Scania in financial services. It's the way we develop the implementation. It either is a huge project, or it's actually a snowball effect, how we take some core functionality and we grow it feature by feature. So the iterations is drops, and all of a sudden now I don't really have a project tollgate model. I have feature release model. So my project model is more, it's agile, I guess, and it's DevOps, I guess. So when you have continuous operations and delivery, do you have project then, or do you have product? Does project exist in this world, or is it something else? Is this portfolio of use cases, portfolio of features? This is my angle, right?
I see what you want. Yeah. And
true to that, if you want to put a nuance on that, I think it's one thing if we're talking about software development.
Yeah.
In particular in software development, where it's hard to sort of set boundaries and know where it's going, and you need to be more iterative and so forth. And there's a different thing if we're talking about other kinds of development. If we're talking about developing the organization, might be good to have a project to make sure that we don't just deprioritize it. But also I think it's important to distinguish between what we as an organization, how we manage projects, and what the project as a tool is. Because what you're talking about, that we distinguish the organization, that they are dealing with the projects and then you hand over it to someone else. And one of the things that some organizations have done is that, well, if you're part of a project, you can't, excuse my French, but you can't put that shit on someone else, but you have to manage that after the project. So that means that when you develop it, you need to ensure that it's robust, that it's you are the line organization. So you don't separate the organization as such. But having said that, I think that we have driven on many levels in the Swedish system as such, and in different organizations, the projectification too far.
That was really my point. So of course there is initiatives and all that, but one of the things that I grew up as I see a real pain point is that the project, it's the core steering, right? So you have line steering that works in some ways, and then you have project steering that works in another way. And when we come to tech now, together with data and business process reengineering, we tend to, even from a project perspective, if you're not careful, we are fragmenting it. So if I have hundreds of projects in a large enterprise, I get project architecture. I get the project that runs its own life, and they build their own tech stack even, right? And it doesn't really scale so well. I mean, like it works within that space. It works within that domain where the project has been raised, but it doesn't work for the whole of the enterprise. So I see to some degree the challenge for the big enterprises, this is my personal experience, is that the project-centric approach, that we have driven it too far. This is line, and we are hardly suffocating. We can't deal with, we are too lean. So we get a management consultant, IT consultants in, and they run the project, and then they piss off. And this doesn't really work. So I've seen some really project is good. I'm not saying that, but I'm also seeing, can you drive it too far? I mean, like that's this whole conversation I want to explore.
A question then, from what I have, I wouldn't say detected, but fragments that I've picked up is the way that we govern project is a problem in itself, because we often have management objectives that we steer on, and they are backward oriented. Yes. How much money have we spent? Yes. How much time have we spent? But it's not really process oriented. How is the team feeling? What's the quality of the software that we're developing? Do we have anything to compare with? But rather we just normally and too often look at time and budget, and it's backward oriented reviews.
Yes,
true. Cool. I think we need to start to round off a bit, unfortunately, even though I'd love to hear more about a lot of other things that we didn't cover. But especially Europe. Okay, let's stop. Cool. Daniel Rencrantz, what's next in your life? Professionally, personally, or what's coming up on your side?
Professionally, I'm shifting my portfolio slightly at Vinnova, which is very interesting. Something that I personally advocated for, that we need to improve our data-driven development and AI in our organization. Mm-hmm. And so what I will be overall responsible for some parts there, not everyone, because some parts will be on IT and so forth, but in the actual development from a business perspective, the needs that we have in the organization. So we have 2 new data scientists now that's coming in to complement this team, which is super important. So we can be more data driven in terms of how we deal with application, but also in terms of the analytics that we do. So that's something that I'm super excited about. So to a certain extent, I'm shifting my focus slightly from being extremely external oriented to be more internal. Not entirely, but to a great extent. And I think that's super interesting for me personally and important for the agency as well.
Making Vinnova more data and AI ready in some way, or?
Indeed. And obviously our key role is to improve the system as such. But to have legitimacy and be a public organization that brings value on all accounts to the taxpayers, we need to work on that side as well.
But I think if you can keep one hand in both pots, would be very, very good for Vinnova, because the more you now start going into operationalizing AI yourself, sitting yourself doing it, I wonder how much that will spill over to how you would frame the agenda, what we need to focus and invest on. Like I was insinuating, maybe we should spend more innovation money funding orchestration problem solving. And if you go into the work where you do the work yourself, maybe even the picture that will help Vinnova to be a better. That would be fantastic, I think.
I think that's a must, really. So for example, before I came here today, I was in a network, startup of a network in AI Sweden for government agents or public organizations, because I think that we as an agency cannot just do it ourselves internally, but in that internal work, we need to look outside of our own walls, get inspiration, get connected, be more forward oriented, lean forward, really. So true to that.
Yeah.
Awesome. And more cross-country skiing perhaps as well,
Indeed, it's perfect weather, isn't it? Yeah. So certainly going to be a lot more cross-country skiing, even though it's a special year with the corona and no
At least right now we can do it at home.
Yeah, that's so good. And I was so sad with the Vasaloppen being cancelled and all that, but this is, to be honest...
Is that a yearly happening for you?
Yeah, I've done it for the last 5-6 years or something like that, improving myself.
What's your time? What's your goal next time?
I haven't decided yet. My best one is 4 hours and 47 minutes. And I started, doing this as a 30-year-old, so everyone can learn.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I think I did it 8 or 9, by the way, 10 years ago.
Cool. If you were to recommend someone to come on this podcast, do you have any specific names in mind?
So many interesting people in this world, isn't it? Anyone in particular? I've seen some of the guests. I can't recommend them. I think it would be interesting to have Mats Snell, for example, that has worked on Lantmäteriet and gone to Dig now, to poke him a bit about the national ambitions and get his insights from trying really hard to turn an agency to be more data ready and be more open in terms of the data work. And he has some interesting insights, so perhaps that could be one interesting guest.
Just a combination of both coming from Lantmäteriet and now ending up in Dig. That's quite interesting.
Otherwise, I love to hear startup stories. That's interesting. One of the apps that I use myself is RaceFox, which measures your movement, and it's quite interesting to hear about their journey from being from 6, which is now Arise, the research institute, and how they have improved their product. And it would be interesting to hear more about that journey, because there's always this challenge when you come as a newbie, when you have the incumbents in terms of Strava and other apps that are not really adapted to, in this case, cross-country skiing, but they have some basic, super good functionality. So how can you manage that in terms of being a startup where you don't have super much funding, I would guess, and a lot of resources? You have to be super specific, but still you have the customers. A lot of the customers compare you to the incumbents.
Well, cool. Speaking about startups and people from that, next week we will have Oliver Edholm. He's in this startup called Depict.ai. So trying to rival Amazon and others in recommender systems and whatnot. So perhaps you can listen into that as well, though.
That's super interesting.
Cool. Thank you very much, Daniel.
I wish we have so many more questions.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Super interesting. I wish you best of luck with your new roles and tasks in Vinnova, and I hope you keep up the great work, and I hope to see you soon speaking publicly again so I can enjoy that awesome, fun experience. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you.